Hello, everyone. I am Judith Kleesner, Grant Training Coordinator for the National Children's Advocacy Center and the host of today's webinar. Thank you for joining today's presentation titled Forensic Interviewing of Domestic Minor Sex Trafficking Victims at Child Advocacy Centers, presented by Iona Rudisil. Iona Rudisil is a licensed social worker who has been conducting forensic interviews for over 16 years and who is presently the lead forensic interviewer at Baltimore Child Abuse Center. She has been a member of the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force for 5 years and has participated in a work group at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to help devise a forensic interview guideline for domestic minors of sexual trafficking.
As soon as you call, you hear her talking. You don't.
I will now turn the presentation over to Iona.
Hi, welcome everyone. So since we have a lot of information to cover today, I will get started. As it was basically stated earlier that I will be taking questions at the end, and we do have some videos. If you can just write those questions down as soon as you think of them, I always find that that's kind of helpful so that you can get all of your information answered. So moving on, today I just want to let you know that our objectives are going to be that everyone who is present at the webinar is going to be able to learn just about how child advocacy centers can be utilized by potential victims of sexual trafficking and what that response actually is and how to possibly conduct the forensic interviews. So there were 3 questions that actually we had in the very beginning, and I was actually trying to see how many have actually been conducting these types of interviews, or if they have any type of knowledge with conducting the interviews for domestic minors of sexual trafficking. Objectives that we're going to go through today are just going to be able to how to conduct these forensic interviews and what those benefits are actually at child advocacy centers. And the protocol, we're going to go through the guideline that we actually use here at Baltimore Child Abuse Center. And make sure my clicker's in the right spot. So I'm going to show a video. This is the first video. Some might have seen it, but others might not have. And basically, it's a video that basically Jim's, the Chief Executive Officer of Jim's has produced. And it's going to take you through a day, the life of a girl who is being trafficked. We can start that now.
You know, you're 12 years old and you're living with your moms, and your mom's is struggling because she didn't think that life was really going to work out like this for her, and she doesn't have a man around, and the men that are around haven't always been that great. Sexual abuse is becoming kind of normal for you, and you think that other people don't have secrets that are as bad as you, and maybe you've tried to talk to somebody at school and they haven't really heard you, or maybe they just haven't had time to listen to you. And so you're seeing these girls on the videos, and they're so pretty and they're so sexy, and so your way at 12 of escaping into this fantasy world is to think about what it must be like to be one of these girls, and you know that adult men already look at you, and you wonder how you can kind of use that.
I was just a child, and that's how I was supposed to live, like a child and like an adult.
So one day you're coming out of school and there's a guy outside in a Cadillac, and he's nice looking. I mean, he's got the baseball cap and the jeans and the Timbs, and he tells you how pretty you are, and you know how pretty your hair looks, and it's been a while since anybody even really noticed anything about you. And for the first time, you feel like somebody's really interested in you, because now all of a sudden he's asking you about your dreams and your hopes and where your father's at. And he says that he can be a daddy to you.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was depending on for support.
And so that night he takes you to a club and he puts you up on the stage and he gives you a few drinks and there's men throwing dollars at you and it's scary, but all the time you're just looking at his face in the back of the room and he's like, you know, go ahead baby girl, go ahead, you're doing it for daddy. And you're feeling proud because nobody's ever said that to you. And so then that night he tells you that there's more stuff that you've got to do, and he takes you into a room and there's a man there and he tells you to strip, and you think this is something you'll never do, and yet there's a part of you that already knew how to do this because that's what your stepfather's been doing to you all these years before. And so you turn that trick, and it's like a part of you has died inside. And so you come out of the club that night and you get in the car and you know he's pumping 50 Cent and he takes you to McDonald's and he tells you, you did a good job tonight, sweetie. And he's stuffing his pockets with the $1,000 that he made. And right now, you're happy.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was depending on for support.
You feel like this is the best that it's ever going to get, and everything else in your life has prepared you for this moment. All the sexual abuse or the neglect or the drama or the pain or the trauma has prepared you for tonight, where you stepped across a line that you always thought you'd never really quite step across. And you don't realize that night what it will be like to be on the track and get raped. And you don't realize that daddy isn't really going to protect you. You don't realize what it's like to have a gun held to your head that night. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you catch your first STD. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you first come home and daddy beats you for the first time because you didn't make enough money. You don't know what it's going to be like to have cops offer to trade sex with you in exchange for not being arrested. And then sometimes you'll do that and they'll still lock you up anyway. You don't know what it's like to sit up in jail and know that you just made $1,500 for your pimp last night, but he won't come down and put $200 bail on just to get you out a few days early. You don't know what it's like to walk down the street at 6 o'clock in the morning when you're just getting off work and people are starting their day and they see you and they know what you do and they look at you in a way that you just don't feel like you belong in that world anymore. And you don't know what it's like to feel like you've lost part of yourself along the way and to feel like you'll never leave. And no matter how many times you try to leave, he'll always find you and catch you. But that night, all you care about is the fact you're riding in a Cadillac and you're eating McDonald's and you're listening to 50 and you got this one man who you really think loves you sitting right by your side.
So I like to show that video first when I start the presentation, just because it gives you a glimpse into what we are actually, the population that we're going to be working with and what we're dealing with, the individuals, the mindset of what actually is taking place, the manipulation that is going on between the pimp and the person who he is trafficking at that particular time. Rachel Boyd actually started GEMS, which is an organization called Girls Educational and Mentoring Services. It's based in New York, and she started it back in 1998. She actually was trafficked in Europe, and she came over to the United States on a mission trip and realized that it just didn't happen in Europe, but it was happening here in the United States, and so that's why she developed GEMS. One of the things that I always like to bring out too is changing the language and being able to understand the distinction between someone who has been trafficked and recognizing them as a victim, as opposed to putting the blame upon them and recognizing them as a child prostitute. One thing I always share when I do the presentation is that there is no such thing as a child prostitute, because of the fact that you can't, it's under the legal age of consenting for a child, and a child does not go out and actually say this is what they aspire to be, that they want to have their bodies sold for hours and hours in one night, where they're consistently raped maybe 25 times in one night, where their finances and their families are taken away from them, their freedom is taken away from them. So that's not something that is actually a choice that they go into making all the information that is out there. Someone who has been prostituted, you see people are more so placing the blame on that individual. They say insults and derogatory terms, calling them sluts and whores, bitches and dogs, cunts, and they're saying that this is a bad child, a child who has made a poor choice, a child who's made a poor decision, whenever they're looking at that name of a person who's been prostituted. They're saying that they are punishable, that this is a crime, that they're going to get a record, and they place that label, which actually adds that long-lasting stigma. But then when you understand that this is really someone who has been victimized, looking at that individual just as you would look at a child's sex abuse, someone who's been sexually abused, you recognize that that child has some developmentally, socially, they cannot make that choice into going into the commercial sex trade. And it also, when you look at it as someone who has been victimized, you're defining what has actually happened to that child rather than labeling the child individually. You're identifying that child as someone who has been victimized, and someone who needs that support, someone who's going to need some services, as opposed to someone who has actually just gone out and done this. I spoke to a survivor who was 19 years old, and she basically said, yes, she had the choice of what to do, but the choice was made to her when the pimp actually kidnapped her from a bus stop, put a gun to her head, knew basically exactly where she was going and what she was doing in her family life, knew that she had a son under the age of 2. And he said, you do have a choice. Your choice is you can walk out of this car and I will kill your son, or you can work for me for the rest of your life. So she made a choice, and that choice was that she was going to protect her son and then also be able to think in herself, I can also get out of here someday. Also, when we look at the trafficking individual in that victimology sense, we are now placing that blame on the perpetrator, and we're causing for there to be a response to that perpetrator, as opposed to placing that stigma on the child of saying that this child actually has made this choice to be prostituted. So just to go through the laws really quickly, back in 2000, the TVPA, Trafficking Victim of Persons Act, was actually started. And what it says for domestic minors, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but what it says for domestic minors of sexual trafficking is that if a child is 17 years or under, there does not need to be any type of force, fraud, or coercion to actually identify them as being trafficked. There only needs to have the aspect of a commercial aspect of sexual exploitation, where there's got to be some type of trading of goods, whether that be of money, drugs, shelter, food, and clothing. There could be an individual who basically needs to, believes that they need to get some money to buy a uniform, a school uniform, and they don't have the resources from their family. So they have a friend, and a friend says to them, look, I know what you can do. You can basically work for so-and-so, and you'll be able to get the money that you need to buy your school clothes and buy everything that you need. And so this individual who has a lack of resources, who has a lack of the ability to gain those resources and a lack of support and services that are given to them might be is more vulnerable to get and go to that pathway and be actually sexually violated that way. In the state of Maryland, back in 2012, we were able to pass a law which basically added sex trafficking into the laws for sex abuse. So that for mandated reporters, we know that if you see or if you know that there's somebody who's being sexually abused, that you can actually report that to authorities. Well, you can now do that if you have any type of concern or information that someone is being trafficked, whether that's through pornography or prostitution. You can actually call to our Department of Social Services, to Child Protective Services, and make a report, and investigation is going to be immediately started. I do know that there are some other cities that actually have that law in place as well for their Department of Child and Family Services, like Florida and Connecticut and Illinois. Those states do have something in place that is very similar to that. Moving on to the next thing, when we talk about who are the actual traffickers, we're saying that they're professionals who have been designated to protect and serve the community. What do I mean by that? They're your police officers. We had a situation in Maryland where there were firefighters who were actually arrested and found that they had been holding a trafficking ring right here in Baltimore City. There are men and women that we see daily, people who are walking on the street, people who are our neighbors, people who we're close to, people who seem to look like everything is going well for them. They're driving in their nice cars, they got their three-piece suits on, or they have their nice business suits on. They speak very intellectually. They do not give any avenue or any realm that there is something actually going on, or that they're trying to be deceptive to deceive and manipulate and to place a child in a vulnerable place. They are teachers who have been governed to educate our children. They're teachers in your school who are just steadily trying to, what we try to do is we want to make sure that the children, what we try to do is, as a parent, you send your child to school thinking that the teachers and the educational system is going to be there to protect your child and to educate your child and to cause your child to grow up in an environment that is safe. And what happens is you have some teachers and some administrators in that educational system who are actually taking advantage of those who are vulnerable. Traffickers are very smart. They're very wise, they're very cunning, and they know exactly how to prey on the vulnerabilities of individuals. There was a teacher who was convicted for 45 years in Oklahoma for sexually exploiting a juvenile through pornography. And she actually would get elementary school girls to dress up in their underwear, and then she'd take those pictures and distribute them. And that's Kimberly Crane. Then there's also the mothers who are supposed to be those nurturers for us. There was an incident in St. Louis where Latasha Jewel McFarland took a plea bargain for prostitution in lieu of some trafficking charges because she was a female pimp of a 13-year-old who had ran away from home, and she basically was prostituting that 13-year-old. Their fathers, who are supposed to be the person who guards and protects and shields their children. And, you know, we have situations where fathers are out there, and unfortunately they are not doing that for their children. They are manipulating them, and they're causing men to come to their house or women to come to their house, and then they're basically prostituting their children for financial gain and for an exploitive move. Their peers, they're the students that you see, they are peers of your sons and daughters, your nieces and nephews. They're clergy, who are supposed to be those who inspire people, but instead they also prey on the vulnerabilities of others. The correlation of, I think I went a little bit too far. Well, how it correlates, that slide should actually not say correlates of domestic minor sexual trafficking, but this is basically some risk factors of what places individuals in a more highly vulnerable stance to being trafficked. And this is another reason why this is good for us to know who work at child advocacy centers, because we're looking at this. We're looking at those who have come in who have been sexually abused, physically abused, and neglected. There's some substance abuse, either the child themselves, an adolescent 15-year-old who has been drinking or using drugs because they've been sexually abused, or they've been victims of domestic violence. They've seen domestic violence. They've witnessed domestic violence. They've witnessed a homicide. There could be chronic runaways, running away from the home 1, 2, 3, 4 times in the course of 1 month, having a mental health diagnosis like schizophrenia or bipolar, and their medications might not be managed as well. So that puts them also in a high vulnerability. They have developmental delays, homelessness, being cognitively impaired, the LGBTQ community, where there's unfortunately a lack of resources that helps to provide support to that community, that places transgender individuals and gay female and gay males in a place of vulnerability, high vulnerability, because they're just looking for acceptance. And like I said, traffickers are master manipulators. So basically what they will do is they will prey on that vulnerability and see, okay, this individual needs some support, they need some love, they need some community involvement, and that's what they create. They create a community within their place, within their organization. It could be poverty, and like I said earlier, witnesses to homicide, so victims or witnesses to violence. And these are basically, those high risk factors, and we know that these come through our Child Advocacy Center. Another reason of why actually, well, not why, but a benefit to having services and conducting forensic interviews at a Child Advocacy Center would be because Child Advocacy Centers go through, they're governed by the NCA, the National Children Alliance's standards, and there's 10 of them. And basically, we know that basically involves the MDT, that they have to have that cultural competency, that they're set up to do those forensic interviews. So they're going to be making sure that the guidelines that they are putting in place are going to be effective for the children that they're going to be seeing, whether they be school-age children or adolescents or even toddlers. They have victim support advocacy. They make sure that that standard is always set in place. And I'm not going to go through all of these because most of us are from Child Advocacy Centers, so we know this. But the one thing that I do want to also bring out again is the child-focused setting. It's very important to knowing that if your Child Advocacy Center is set up to conduct these type of forensic interviews for children who have been sexually trafficked, you want to make sure that that environment is something that is not so governed to just toddlers and school-aged children, but that they're also governed to adolescents. So when you walk in, when a 17-year-old walks in off of the elevator or walks in through the doors, they just don't want to see pink elephants on the wall or purple elephants or little modules hanging from the ceilings. They want to make sure that they see something that yes, is warm and friendly. You've got the warm colors and everything. And yes, you have a child section. You have a section that is literally governed to school-age and toddlers. But there's also a space that's set up there so adolescents can be comfortable in what they're doing and what they're about to talk about. The NCAA National Children Alliances also have that forensic interview standard, and the way that forensic interviews are to be conducted, we know are to be conducted in a legally sound, neutral, fact-finding nature. And that is really important. And even though it does say here to avoid duplicative interviewing, it's not saying that you can't have more than one interview. The duplicative interviewing was more so set up to the fact that, okay, the detective is going to interview, a social worker is going to interview, a mental health professional is going to interview. No, you're going to have one person who's going to do that interview. Of course, you'll have the law enforcement agent who is actually going to sit there and actually follow through, have some follow-up interviews to get some further information that is going to be necessary and needed for their investigation. Some, components that we know that are involved with the forensic interview is the specialized training that is ongoing, the consistent peer review, the multidisciplinary team, that you have those investigators that are present at the time of the interview. We don't conduct any interviews here unless enforcement or child protective services actually there. For these particular interviews that we are talking about, the ones for domestic minors and sexual trafficking, there must be law enforcement that is present so that they can help any type of questions that might be necessary, give us some more information. If there's any type of evidence that we need to bring forth during the interview, that we can do that as well. And most of the time they're here at the CAC, but there are other times they're conducted other places as well. But the benefit of it being at a CAC is the fact that it's a neutral setting. So there was a state's attorney that once presented and said that it was really good to have a forensic interviewer that is conducting these type of interviews away from the investigation, because then the detective can use all of their time and put all of their energy into doing what they need to do to build their case and to get the criminals who have been enacting that crime upon that child. And then also the CPS worker who is able to do the investigation that they need to do so that they can spend more time in making sure all of the factors that are needed to maintain that safety, the safety that is needed for that individual and the families. And so you don't have to worry about having compromising roles, because the forensic interviewer, once they gather the information and they receive the information, they share that information and give it to their team members so that they can complete the investigation. You do today's best practice standards. That continues to move on. The wonderful thing about forensic interviewing is that it is a profession that is steadily evolving. You're definitely always developing your skills, and new researchers are always emerging for us to do what we need to do. So through, we know that there's a lot of guidelines that are out there. And I know that I'm going a little bit quickly. I just want to get to some more of the meat of the presentation. But we know that there's a lot of different guidelines that are out there for conducting forensic interviews. And when I came over to Baltimore Child Abuse Center, like it was said, I've been working in the field of forensic interviewing for over 16 years. But I've been here for 5 years. And when I came over here, I realized that we, as a CAC, could have a response. Didn't know what that response was going to look like, but that we could have a response to domestic minors and sexual trafficking, because they're basically a part of what we do. We need to know how to conduct interviews when we're called upon, and we need to know how to conduct interviews even when we're talking about a child who's been sexually abused. And there are some concerns because of the risk factors that we see that they may be highly vulnerable of being sexually trafficked. So we can go into some further questions to get that information out. So as we looked at the different guidelines, as we looked at the ones that we were using, we realized that we had to just combine maybe some basic things in order to get the best out of our interviews. And so what we started with was doing Tom Lyons' 10-step investigative interview. And so we went through his and started making some adaptations to it. And then as we went along, we started to pull some stuff from the NCAC-W-030 protocol. We pulled some from the APSAC practice guidelines. And so that when we testify now, when we're going on the stand, what we now say is that, because this is a question that is always asked, what type of protocol, what type of guideline do you use when you're conducting the interview? And we basically say that we use the guideline that is connected to the APSAC best practice guidelines for forensic interviewing. Because basically it gives you all the steps that you need in order to conduct the interviews that we need to conduct. And as we were doing this, we basically formulated a protocol. So I gathered all that information, put it into a protocol, a guideline that we use here at Baltimore Child Abuse Center. And at that time frame, I was also asked to be a part of a 16-group work group that was actually being held at the National Center for Children through the Department of Justice. Because what the Department of Justice was seeing was that there were a lot of professionals out there that were conducting interviews for domestic minors of sexual trafficking, but it was all different. And some had some similarities, and then there was some that just didn't know how to do it and was just trying to kind of feel their way. And that's how we were doing it initially. So when I was invited to the work group, we did that and found out that there were very similarities to the guideline that I developed here at BCAC to the guideline that they actually presented and what we actually worked on while we were down in Virginia at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And that's a guideline that is going to be on the national scope. And so you'll be, if you haven't heard of it yet, you will be receiving some information about it in the near future. And that's just so everybody can have something, some type of base. And of course, you just basically curtail it to your advocacy center, to the needs of your advocacy center, to your jurisdiction, and what your NDT wants. Because once again, the nature of conducting these interviews is we must have NDT involvement. We have to have our team members on board, or it's just not going to be as effective. So I'm just going to go through in the next, the last part of this is to just take some more time and to really go through piece by piece how our protocol is set up, how we conduct the interviews here, and also show you some examples. One of the things that survivors have shared with me is that you never want, when someone who is coming, they've now got the strength, they've now got the will, they're now able to talk about all of the heinous things and the traumatizing things that have happened to them. They don't want someone talking to them who gives off the impression that they know what's going on, because they haven't lived that lifestyle. We haven't lived that lifestyle. As many survivors that I have talked to, spoken with, I've formed relationships with, and have even become friends with, I still don't know exactly what they've been experiencing because I have not experienced it myself. And so one of the things that they always bring out and we always share is that you don't want to share, you don't want to initiate the lingo, but you want to be able to mirror the language that is being said. What does that mean? Basically that, okay, they're in the pimp culture, trafficking culture, a stable is basically a family. That's what they call their family, which is a host of all of those who are being prostituted and trafficked in that arena. So we wouldn't sit down in an interview and just begin, the forensic interviewer would just not sit down and say, So tell me about your stable. We wouldn't say that, but we would more so say, tell me about your family. And then if they bring up stable, then we will then in turn start using their words and say stable. But we don't want to bring that up. If they say, okay, I was choosing up the other day, and choosing up is just another lingo of basically saying that the person who was
You have been
prostituted
muted.
actually looked at another pimp.
Your microphone has been turned on.
Looked into the eyes of another pimp, and they're not supposed to be doing that. That's one of the rules that pimps will always say. You do not look into the eyes of your pimp unless you are asked to do so, or you don't definitely look into the eyes of another pimp. So like I said, we're not going to be using their words before they use them themselves. So if they start saying it, then yes, then we'll continue to mirror. It's the same thing that we do when we conduct the interviews for those who have been sexually abused. So when we start off, we have to have an understanding of knowing that there's going to be some resistance. Sometimes we don't know what that resistance is going to look like. It's going to look a little bit different in different places and in different arenas, but we do need to know that there's going to be some type of resistance. And why? Well, because that child might have witnessed her pimp murdering another person in the stable within their family. The child also could have been arrested and raped by police officers. Like I said, police officers, those who have been governed to protect us, are also buyers, we know, and have also been convicted of being pimps as well. Some police officers. I'm not saying all of law enforcement. The child might have been in the game for years. It does say the life. The pimps actually call it the life, and survivors call it the game. And the reason for that distinguishment is the distinction between those two is that the pimps want to make it so that that individual feels that this is their life now, that they have no place to go, that this is where they are going to live, this is where they are going to die, this is where all their hopes and their dreams lie, and it is not going to go away. Survivors look at it a different way and say, this is the game, because they are now been forced to play a game for a master manipulator for so many weeks, months, or years. Some other resistance could be that, the pimp has told the individual that, I'm going to murder your family. I'm going to murder the ones that you love. There was a survivor that I spoke to, and she actually was initiated, recruited into the game, into trafficking when she was 14 years old. And she said the reason why she went in was because she had a 12-year-old sister. And the pimp said, if you do not come on board, then I'm going to go after your 12-year-old sister. So once again, you have the 14-year-old who's now trying to protect her little sister. There's also situations where you have a 12-year-old who wanted to get involved in it because that's where her sister was, and they had that connection. And so the pimp was able to pull them into it. And once they got in, you have those threats of the manipulation and the coercion that is happening. But like I said earlier, in the law that TVPA puts out for juvenile situations, 17 years and younger, you do not need threat, force, or coercion. So in our introduction, here we are now about to go into the interviews. And, we go out, we receive, here at Baltimore Child Abuse Center, we'll receive a request, our referrals to conduct an interview from law enforcement, whether that be from local, state, federal, and we will speak with them, get just some base information, set it up, it'll be scheduled, and then they'll come here. If it's the case that also involves Child Protective Services, then Child Protective Services might be the one to make the phone call first, letting us know who the law enforcement, either detective, sergeant, or agent, who's working with the case. When they come out into our setting, we do have a child care specialist that will just, meet with them. We'll meet with them too, just to give them an overview of what's going to take place. And then we're ready to bring them into the room. We come into the room, we introduce ourselves, we let them know, this is our job, this is what we're going to be doing, this is how we're going to be talking today. And since we don't know a lot of details, we're just going to be asking some questions, and we just want to have that agreement that we're going to be honest with one another. Some people I know say that they're going to do the promise to tell the truth. Some people say, ask them, will they do that? Well, this is another example of why we need to work with your MDTs, because with our MDTs, they did not want us to use the word promise at all. So that's why we changed that up a little bit. We're also, if we're going to use evidence, then that's the time that we actually talk about evidence. We do that in the very beginning, and we just say, a quick statement. I have some pictures here, or some chats, or some texts with me that I'm going to show you a little bit later. And don't talk about it again until it's time to actually show that information. We go through some practice narratives, asking them to, just building up that rapport, asking them about their likes, what they don't like. We also want to ask about social media, because we know that they're all on social media, and during that time we'll also ask about, their screen names and information like that. We want to get them, of course, to do that practice narrative, and we'll still do that. So we'll ask them for them to tell us about something significant. We usually go with the last, birthday, but that might not be the most significant thing. And sometimes, they could have been recruited on their birthday, when they turned 15, and now they're about to turn 16. So their last birthday has a very sour taste in their mouth. So one of the things of finding out that information in the very beginning, why it's very helpful to know about just some little things about what's going on with the case, and meeting with your team members, is to get some information like this, so that we know what questions to steer away from and what questions we can really go into. One of the things that we'll do, if it's unknown, we won't even put up birthdays or holidays or things like that. We'll just say, if they tell me everything that you did this morning, from the time that you woke up until the time you came here today. Just to try to give an example of, this is how we want you to share with us. We want you to be as detailed as possible, as much as you can. We'll still go through the don't know instructions, don't understand, you're wrong instructions, and we do that for the basis of, setting up those instructions. Everybody does it differently at your CAC, but whatever your instructions are, you do want to do that. We don't provide examples for children who are 11 years and older. So for a 17-year-old, 16-year-old, 15-year-old, or sometimes even an 11-year-old who is, very mature, we still might not do those examples. So it's always, trying to feel out how we're going to do it. Then, in order to get into the nuts and bolts of into the allegation section, we'll have now our transition questions. So we've gone through the instructions, we're building up the rapport. We've talked about social media, we've done that. Now we go straight into, okay, now tell me why you're here today. If we know that there was a sting operation that took place, we can say, okay, I know that there was a situation that took place at a hotel this morning, and I want you to tell me about what took place. We want to know from their perspective what's taking place. We also will ask, tell me your side of what happened. It's really important that we know why you're here. If the child is not saying anything, if that reluctancy is there, because we want to just keep going as much as we can. And if we're still not getting anything, we still might go into that transition questions. I heard that someone took some pictures of you. If we know that there are pictures taken, like I said, we're not going to say anything in our transitional mode that is not a fact. And when I say a fact, we mean something that is documented from our professionals that are coming from our profession. So this is a interview that took place. Remember when I said about different operations that take place? So this is one of our interviewers here, and she is speaking to an adolescent who is a part of a operation at a major hotel down at our harbor. And they're old, and you can start the video. Okay, I think here we go. Okay. So, sorry about that video. Basically, I showed this video because this video was during that transitional time of, tell me why you're here. And just giving a little bit of information about what has taken place. This, like I said, was a 17-year-old, and basically she had a learning disability. Her female trafficker actually was sentenced, and was sentenced to 18 to 10 years for the offense on her, against her. This next one, and I'm not sure if we can start it. This is another transitional, a video talking about that transitional phase. If we do get a little bit stopped, we'll just stop the video, and I'll just tell you about what's taking place. She is a 30-year-old cognitively impaired woman, and she was actually thought to be the bottom girl, which is in the actual hierarchy of their business. She would be the second person in command. But yet she was also being prostituted. We can start that video now. Okay. So basically, I'll just share with you about some of these videos. It's unfortunate that we're unable to see them because I think it's going to let you know, exactly how, we're asking the questions and the type of answers that we're receiving. So this one, like I said, she's 30, and she was able to identify her pimp, and she clearly talks about how she's willing to help the cops, she wants to help the cops, and she was actually someone who had already had a record of prostitution. And so basically we have a vacation law that is here in the state of Maryland. We have some attorneys that basically work with those who have been charged of being prostituted. And so they can get the information and try to get that prostitution arrest vacated, actually dismissed and taken off of the record. So this was one of the individuals that they were trying to do that for. But like I said, she had some intellectually cognitive, she's intellectually impaired. She had a cognitive impairment. And so, and she had a very low IQ. And because of that, this is how she functioned. And she was very challenging to work with her. Even though she gave a lot of information, she provided so much detail about the industry that she was working in, that she'd been a part of. She actually was working with 2 different pimps, and she was seen as the bottom girl for one of them. And there were a lot of, the reason why I like to show this one too is it also talks about, I like to share about the family pieces, because this individual had a sister, and because her and her sister, although they're not twins, they look alike, that when she was no longer in the game, the pimps were now thought that her sister was her, and so they were now going after her sister. So that was also placing her sister in danger, and she was calling the family advocate and just trying to get some information and resources on how to protect herself. But she did, there are some times when you don't have that much resistance, and they're willing to just share a lot of information with you. We talk about the free narrative. Some questions that we'll ask is, we want you to think back. I want you to think back and tell me everything that happened from, the time that Jimmy Bob first recruited you until the first time that, he took you to the hotel. We might also make a statement of, if we just want to hone in on that one incident, they're asking us to hone in on one situation. We'll say, okay, when you were dropped off at the hotel, tell me everything that happened when Jimmy Bob, who is the pimp, Jimmy Bob dropped you off at the hotel. Tell me everything that happened, because that's information that could be valuable for the investigators of also trying to get the buyers and see who actually was purchasing this individual. We get clickers now. We also go through some feeling questions, sensory questions. They're very important when we're talking about, tell me what you were thinking, tell me what you were feeling. That resulted in you leaving, talking about, maybe if you, they're trying to find out how they actually got involved, why you were, what were you thinking and what were you feeling that caused you to result from leaving your home. If you see any type of tensing up in shoulders or anything like that, you can acknowledge that, saying, okay, I see that I've asked you that question, and I see that you tensed up your shoulders. Tell me about that. Or if the child, also when you're talking about feelings, if the child just says, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm tired of talking about this. I'm not ready to talk about this. Then that's another question that you can ask at that time, is saying, tell me what you're thinking about, why you don't want to talk about it. Tell me how you feel about everything that's happened. Just trying to get at those feeling questions and using the thinking questions as well when they're trying to give you some information. Sensory, everything that you heard, everything that you saw, everything that you felt, because we want to know these things. That helps the investigation as well, and it helps to provide not just the investigation. When I'm saying that, I'm not just honing in on the fact that the purpose of us doing a forensic interview is for the purpose of an investigation. The purpose of us doing a forensic interview is to find out the details of what happened so that we can move forward. I'm going to share with you what happened in this interview, in this particular one, because I have a feeling that this is also not working, so just so that we don't lose any more time. But in this particular one, this was a child that I had interviewed who, she was 16, and before she talked about anything about being trafficked, she wanted to talk about her sex abuse. So for about 2 hours, we talked about her sex abuse and basically how she was sexually abused by her mother's boyfriend and all the details of that, and then she started talking about how she was trafficked. And we give this example because when you have a situation, there's the child who's been sexually abused and the child who's also been trafficked. And so before they get to the trafficking piece, the piece of being sexually abused is more pivotal that they want to actually talk about. It's more important for them to talk about that first so that they can get that out, and then they'll go to the next thing. And what we have to do is just take our time to do that. The reason why this interview lasted so long is because she just still wanted to talk. We did take breaks, but she still wanted to talk. But at the end, when she started, at about the 3-hour mark, when she started doing a little bit about the trafficking pieces, that's when she said she was ready to take a stop. And so that was an interview that was followed up with. So, another way of trying, when we're trying to get information about who's in the household, who's in their family, like I said earlier, who's in their stable, some questions that we'll ask would be, tell me about where you live, who lives with you, tell me something that makes you feel safe, where you live, Tell me something that makes you feel unsafe or scared where you live, because we don't want to assume, we don't know where they're living, we don't know what's actually going on, and we're just doing our best to try to get as much information from them as we possibly can. Tell me something that you've seen where you live, that sensory question coming up again. Tell me something where you live that you don't like. Have you ever lived anywhere else? Because this could be someone who has run away many different times, or also someone who's in transient where, okay, they're being moved. They might have started the first video that I showed you. She was trafficked from New York, and she came to Maryland, and then she went back to New York. So there are situations where, of course, you're being trafficked from different areas, as we know of, or you're being trafficked within the same city, but from different houses. So we want to know exactly all the places that they've been, and get as much, the key is to get as much details as possible, and to do that the best way that we can in the most non-leading way and non-direct way. Tell me about where you go to school. Some of them are not working, and some of them are not going to school, but a lot of the survivors are still, they did share with me that they're still going to school. The 14-year-old is still going to school because that's also a recruiting ground. So their pimps want them to be in school. Their pimps want them to still keep up that image. Tell me, how do you get from place to place? Because we want to know how they're getting there, who's driving them, because that'll also try to pinpoint who actually is the pimp. So these are all questions that can help us get to identification as well, when we know what's happening in their particular household, in their particular family, their stable. We're asking questions to elicit information about who is in charge, how their household is set up, and who else might also be being victimized. So that's why we're asking as many questions as possible, because we want to see who else is also there. Because if there's also 15, 14, 13, 12, 8-year-olds there, we want to get that information as well, which is usually the case. We also know that there's not just one person. And with this one, this is just another one of getting that information of who else was actually around. If the individual is talking, the survivor is talking to us, we're conducting this interview, and we're still not getting all the details that we need about how they're traveling from place to place, or who actually is their pimp, or they haven't even mentioned that they have a pimp. Another way of getting that information is, asking questions. Tell me about, where do you work? Tell me everything about that. What do you call your employer? Tell me everything about that. Because, there are situations where we know the pimp and the survivor is the boyfriend, girlfriend, but there's also a lot of times when there really is, the pimp is saying, I own you. I'm your employer. I'm the one who basically is going to, I'm the end all to your life. So we're talking about, we want to find out some other questions that we might use. Tell me how you're getting paid. Tell me everything about what happens after work until you go to sleep. Tell me about, what is a day at work for you? Tell me everything that happens. And these are just other questions that we're trying to get some information from, if they're not sharing information with us. She actually, during this little take, this example right here in this video, she actually was sharing with me about how she had left her home, she had run away, and she was now staying of hers, and her friend was now introducing her to yet another pimp, a new pimp, and that they were now going to go into a different stable. So she was sharing all that information in that particular video. And some other questions that we're trying to get at, the pornography. I heard some pictures were taken. And this is only, when we talk about this piece, this is once again an MDT decision. What you can do within your Child Advocacy Center, within your jurisdiction, if you are the interviewer who are conducting these and say you're a consultant and so you're not operating out of one Child Advocacy Center, but you're going to different Child Advocacy Centers to do that, you just want to know within that particular jurisdiction that their team members, their state attorney's office, their law enforcement, that how they want you to actually present evidence, if they want you to present it. Some jurisdictions do not want the interviewers to present it, and some jurisdictions do. So it really depends upon what your jurisdiction wants you to do. In ours, we are able to do that on a case-by-case basis. And like I said, we will first do that introduction in the very beginning, and if they haven't brought up anything about the chats or the texts or the pictures that we have, then we'll bring that out. We'll try to ask these questions first, and then we'll basically say, okay, now I'm going to bring out these pictures. And the pictures that I was telling you about earlier, and first you describe the pictures. We say exactly what we see in the pictures. And it's like, and when I say exactly what we see, we give like a description. Like I see a female in this picture, and this female is sitting on a bed, and then there's a gentleman that is standing behind the female, and I want you to just look at this picture and tell me what you know about this picture. And then present the picture to them. Let them look at it, give them time to look at it. And then you take the picture back, and then we put the picture away. Or you take the chats back, or you take the texts back, whatever evidence it is that you're actually presenting during the interview. There are some positives to doing that because of the skill base that forensic interviewers have, understanding the development of a child and being able to have that sensitivity and understanding at that time and building that relationship with that individual. So that's a positive. But there's also, a positive sometimes to having the evidence being presented outside of the forensic interview room. So it really just depends on what your jurisdiction wants you to do. But these are some questions, and these are some other questions about how we would present it, how we would actually get some information about pornography prior to us presenting that evidence. And I did go ahead of myself because, but I wanted to make sure that I put the two of them together. We also want to find out about the different associations, the different people that are involved in this child's life. Who the bottom girl is, who are the other people there, who is the pimp, trafficker. So if they're not giving us this information, once again, some questions that we will ask to get that information is, tell me who's in your family. Do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a boyfriend? Tell me about that, because it could be their girlfriend who is their pimp. It could be their boyfriend who could be their pimp. Tell me the things that you like to do with your girlfriend or your boyfriend. So that's why we'll go, in that realm of asking questions like that. If something happens to you that, you don't like, tell me about that. What happened? Because we want to try our best to find out not only what the associations are, but how, what happens in those associations. What is the dynamic of those relationships? Tell me, how do you make contact with someone? This is a very important question. When, you need to make contact with someone in the case of an emergency, or someone needs to make contact with you, tell me, who do you contact if you have an emergency? If somebody needs to get you, tell me, how do they get in touch with you? We're also talking about tattoos. Once again, if we're not getting, say we're not getting information, or we know that We know that there's branding that takes place where pimps are branding their property, because remember, they think of these women, girls, boys, who they're trafficking as property, that they're going to brand them and they're going to put their names on there. They're going to put the name of their stable. They're going to put their nicknames on them. And so if we know, once again, we have that fact that they have tattoos, we can just go right in there. But if we don't know, if it's covered, we can just, ask the question, do you have any tattoos? Tell me about it. Tell me everything about how you received this tattoo. Tell me everything about this tattoo. They don't necessarily have to show us the tattoo. That's not what we're asking. But what we're asking is that you tell us, we want to get as much information about that tattoo, where it happened. Because maybe it was the bottom girl who took the survivor to the place to get the tattoo. And while they were at that place, some things took place. So we want to find out what happened, how they got to being tattooed, whose idea it was to get the tattoo. What does the tattoo mean? Was there anybody else who was there that, could be a witness as well? Does anyone else receive a tattoo? So we want to get all that information, and these are some of the questions that we would ask. Like, tell me everything about, was there anyone else there? So that flowed a little bit better, but I did notice that there was also some buffering problems and some stoppage. So just to give you a background, this is a 14-year-old who basically was recovered after having a missing persons report on file. We found out that she was actually trafficked. We thought she was trafficked from a different state to Baltimore, but she was recruited while she was in a different state, but she actually lived here in Baltimore. And she found her way back to Baltimore, and then her pimp found her here, and she did come and talk to us. The situation with this, which I didn't say earlier, is that a lot of things that happen when we're working with this population is something that's called trauma bonding, where you have that relationship with that pimp, you have that individual who you're close to, who you feel really is looking after for your best interest. So even though law enforcement got involved, different support services got involved, and everything, she's doing really well, but she did end up going back with the pimp. But the pimp was eventually arrested. So there still was a good ending to this as well. So we're just coming up on our finality and just a couple more slides to get through. I talked to you already about how we would present the evidence, about, just reminding them that we had talked about it earlier. And the big thing is that we're going to describe it, we're going to show it, and then we're going to put it away. We want to make sure that when we're conducting these interviews, we're going to take at least one break. Sometimes we take 2 or 3, depending upon how long the interview is. And also, just gauging how the individual that we're talking to, they might need to take more than one break. Or there's some other follow-up questions that, even though we use a bug in the ear here at BCAC, we know that every setup and every child advocacy center is a little bit different. But you want to be cognizant of the amount of breaks that you're going to take. So that's something that you do want to discuss with your team members a little bit ahead of time, and just to let them know, okay, well, I'm definitely going to take a break. When would you like me to take a break? And if they say, whenever you feel it's necessary, then you can go with that. But that is a discussion that you definitely want to have during that preliminary time, that pre-planning before you go into the interview. This is a video that after they took a break, the interviewer came back in. It was almost over, and they gave a lot of information. So after the break, you can also ask more questions, clarifying questions, and that's when you might be able to get even some more detailed information about what's taking place. So it's also to help with the clarification, help with getting more details, and then just to see if there's anything else that is needed before we go back into our closure. How we end, we'll say, what else do you want to talk about today? Tell me about you think that I should know. And then an alternative closing that we use is, since we've been talking for a while and it's been a long day, we can stop for now. But we'll continue talking later when you come back. How do you feel about that? So that they have some power. They know that there's some control. If I don't want to come back and I don't want to talk, then it's okay for me not to talk. But it's okay for us to stop now because we have been doing a lot of talking. And then, of course, just telling thank you. It's very important that after the end of the interview that we are going to tell them, thank you for their time, thank you for talking to us, and then we leave it at that. I know that was a lot of information, and unfortunately some of the videos did not take place, but right now we're open to answer some questions that people have. Move forward.
We want to thank Iona for her time and thank all of our participants for showing up today. This webinar